Welcome everybody to A Little Perspective. This is your host Pranav and Nikhil. Today we had a very special conversation with our guest Bruce Anderson. Bruce is the managing partner at Be Creative, a consulting firm here in Regina, Saskatchewan. He is also a man who's accomplished a lot in the fields of non-for-profit, management consulting, entrepreneurship, and post-secondary education.
Our conversation today revolved a lot around entrepreneurship. We learned a lot about how great businesses run and how great leaders inspire others to be themselves, and how the most important thing for a person is integrity. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation as much as we did, and I hope it leaves you with a little perspective.
Welcome Bruce to A Little Perspective. How are you this morning?
Great. That's fantastic.
Yeah? So, just for our viewers, listeners, and our audience members, how about we just start this podcast, get the ball rolling by you telling a little bit about yourself and, just like what you do, whatever you'd like to share, just to get the ball rolling.
Sure. I teach business strategy and entrepreneurship at the Hill and Levine Schools of Business at the U of R. I also run a consulting practice and have for 20 some years. My background could be divided into sort of three sections. One was I was in senior management with not-for-profit organizations in health and gaming and other industries for about 15 years. I've been an entrepreneur aggressively for about 20 years, and I continue to be an entrepreneur as a consultant. And then about 17 years ago, I joined the university and started teaching there. And I've done a variety of things at the university. Beyond just teaching, I was 3 years as a AVP, Associate Vice President of Development, working for the president. And I've done some other things as well.
That's awesome. Well, quite the extensive portfolio that you have here.
Yeah, I can't keep a job, basically.
Yeah. And I just want to ask you, how did you get into teaching? Because you've been an entrepreneur, you've run businesses, and you've run some big businesses. How did you get into teaching?
Yeah, a little roundabout, I guess. One is, one aspect was I've been doing facilitation of workshops, financial management, strategic planning, board development, other things since the late 80s. And so I've had an interest always in basically in adult education. I took a certificate when I finished working, and I was in as an entrepreneur. I took a certificate in adult education. I earlier than that, I also did my MBA while I was working, and so I did it part-time over the course of 5 years. And it was when I was on the board of the Regina Chamber of Commerce that the dean of the business school and myself were on the board together. And I said to him, I miss doing some of the research and doing some of those things. Why don't we do some research? We had common interests in board development and chairs of boards and things like that. Why don't we do some research, and then we'll publish perhaps a book even, and then we'll sell it. We'll sell that research and do stuff. And he says, why don't you come over to the university and do some teaching, and then you can do all the consulting you want. And so at that point in time, two of my businesses were winding down or spending less, had needed a lot less time than I day to day. And the consulting, I could do whatever I wanted to do and as much as I wanted to do. And so I said, sure, sounds great. And so I taught a few classes, got a sense of could I manage the day-to-day kind of stuff, like going to school and teaching a class every single day. It's not for the faint of heart. You go and am I still passionate about teaching if I do that? And I found it worked fine, and I enjoy the aspect of teaching. I enjoy working with my colleagues. I enjoy my continued learning as not only an academic, but somebody that's curious about life in general.
Right.
And so the school provides a lot of those things. I get to meet great students like yourselves and so forth. And that's a really helpful part of my life. I wouldn't go as far as say it keeps me young, but it keeps me energized. It keeps me active. The aging thing is different. That's a different dimension.
So, like you see, like there's a lot of profs that, like you said, like you have a passion and you incorporate that into teaching, but there's a lot of profs out there who just teach for the sake of teaching. So how do you make like your classrooms, like the material that you have, like more engaging, more interesting? Because I remember when I was with you, when I had Biz 100, that was like my first university class. You had like a few guest speakers in our classes, and that's how you like engaged more and more students to like learn more about the community, like the business world. So are those like some points that you do or incorporate into your classes? Like how do you make your classes more engaging?
Well, I think there's the reality that is people are, they can be academics, which means that they really prefer the research activity and the learning and so forth. And the teaching is a requirement to do it. And so in that kind of context, sometimes the teaching is not as focused. As well, the academic tends to be very deep and narrow. They have a body of knowledge that's really important for students and important for academia, but it's narrow. So I came in as a business owner and as a former manager, leader, and I would say that I've got a shallower band of knowledge in many of the subject areas, but it's wide. So I can teach accounting classes, I've taught finance, I've taught marketing, those kind of things. So, but to get to your question, I believe very strongly that students benefit from experiential learning, which is practical learning. It means the application of things from a real world perspective. And one of the attributes that I bring to the classroom is, hey, I've been there, done it, and I know the theory says this might work this way, but in practice it works this way. And the students value those kind of lessons and those kind of materials. So the experiential means things like cases and projects that might involve local companies and organizations. It could mean things like guest speakers who have more knowledge or more specific knowledge than I might have in a particular subject, and add variety. And then ultimately, we look at that as a student-focused or student-centered kind of learning, where the student becomes, what is it that the student needs to get out of it? And what I also tell sort of newer faculty when they come in is teaching is a bit of performance and content. And you got to be good at both. And so the performance is somebody that's comfortable speaking. And, it's taken me a long time to be comfortable as a speaker and things like that. I naturally tend to be shyer than other things. And so what it means is that for me, I had to become comfortable in what I was doing and how I'm doing. And I still get nervous before every single class because I figure if I'm not nervous, I'm probably dead. And so it really means that if I'm not up for the challenge, the challenge is going to overwhelm or I'm not looking forward to the challenge. I'm not learning from the challenge. And so those things become really important. And the content part is, of course, you have to have something to back up what you say. So you have to be knowledgeable, and I have expertise in a lot of areas and my classes tend to be classes that focus on practical things like strategy, which is sort of decision making in a corporate perspective. I teach a consulting class. I teach entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs how to form businesses and do feasibility studies and be creative in their thinking. So these are all things that have a practical focus to them, but there's academia that goes with them. And so having that rigor of the content that is defended, it's not just stuff I make up. It's been vetted in research, it's been vetted in learning over time. And so you've got to do both. And I think the students value somebody that's good engaging them, but also has something to say. Like if I just told stories all the time, the students would become very bored, and would become very withdrawn from that perspective. So the point there is using some of the adult learning techniques to draw students in. And one of the techniques I use is, and it's not something I created, but it's called Think, Pair, and Share. And you'll maybe recall from the classes, what I often have students do is sit down for a second. I'll give them a question and answer. I'll give them a few seconds to do it, 15 or 20 seconds or so. Start to formulate their answers to that question. And then I'll pair them up in other person next to them. Sit down and talk about what your answer was. And then I'll put them into a larger group, maybe 4 people. Maybe it'll come back right to the classroom. And in doing that, what I've done in that particular case is force the student to do some thinking on their own, then have that thinking verified or contrasted with others' thinking. So person thinks, well, maybe I'm way wrong, and then they talk to the other student, and the other student says, yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking, or you bring up a great point, this is what I was thinking, and the students learn from each other. And then when they come to share it in the classroom, which is the benefit for all of the students, they feel a little better about their knowledge, their offering to the classroom.
That's pretty awesome. So you talked about how you tell stories in a class and that engages the class. Our podcast is all about storytelling.
Yeah.
And we believe like a story has a lot of power and it can connect people. It could inspire people. What's your take on the power of storytelling?
I'm a big fan of storytelling. When we get together as a family and stuff like that, we always have little pranks and situations that have happened and things like that happened over time. And our stories are the same, and we all enjoy telling them. But we started to number our stories, and we'd go, that's a 25, and so we tell, hey,
like rank them?
remember 25,
oh, okay,
number 25 story, and we tell it, and make the other people believe that somehow we know what each story is by the number. But so the storytelling is part of culture of a family. It's part of a culture of a community. But the storytelling is really very important when you get into culture, like a corporate culture, an organizational culture, because some of the things that happen in a culture and building a culture are based on things like rituals and stories.
Right.
So you go into a company and you hear that the founder started the company this way and came up and worked and lived in a little apartment and now lives in a mansion and whatever else that you may believe. That has a powerful storytelling. So it speaks to things like working hard, persevering, and those pieces become lessons, takeaways for the people that join an organization. And when people join an organization, you've got a standard manual that might tell them what they should do, but then there's somebody that says, here's the way it actually works. And that's sort of the water cooler orientation, where you stand beside the water cooler where everybody's come to get their drink, and somebody says, but do you know that if you do this, they'll probably fire you. And so that becomes, those stories, if you will, become part of that. And organizations that are very successful, often the leader at the top is an effective storyteller. And we've seen series of leaders that have been effective storytellers. I think of somebody like Eric Dillon that ran Connexus Credit Union for 10 years. He was very effective at tying a story together. Very good. I think of Murad Al-Khatib that runs AGT Food and Ingredients. Very effective in telling a story. These are important skill sets that somebody has. And leaders tend to get people engaged. By definition, you're not a leader unless somebody follows you.
Right.
And one of the ways that you follow them is to illustrate that you've got traits and empathy and emotional intelligence and the other things that people would value from you. And they don't get those things unless you tell some of the stories that go with it.
That reminds me of like an amazing quote by Simon Sinek. And he's a great storyteller, an orator, and a business leader. And he says that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So if your why is clear, if you can shape like a story out of your why, I think there won't be a single person in your company who actually believes in your why won't follow you.
Well, and the other thing that's becoming very much dominant, and this is very, I would say, anecdotally, and I think there's increasing evidence to it, but anecdotally, which means that we're basically seeing examples of it. When we can't say that 19 out of 20 people, 93% confidence that we can do that. But we're seeing anecdotally that the generation Z and the current, what you'd call young people,
Gen Z, yeah.
are looking at that and they say, I want to work and do something that matters. I want to work for an organization that has purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And Simon Sinek also talks about purpose, and there's lots of authors that talk about purpose. And purpose is not a mission statement. We will try to be this for everybody. Purpose is really, why do people want to get behind your organization and do the things? And so we see very successful organizations, again, that have very clear purpose in what they do. And pick an example, like, an Apple, is an innovative culture. Their purpose-led is to really provide tools that maybe the person hasn't ever understood that they might need, and in the future they might benefit from. And so that innovative, that being in front of that integrative thing they do, that's sort of part of their purpose. And somebody that joins at that time would join Steve Jobs, who was a mixed boat as a leader. Like, he did some really compelling, and if you have spare time, there's a couple biographies of Steve Jobs, and one of them is done by a guy by the name of Walter Isaacson. And Isaacson did a biography of Leonardo da Vinci, which I found incredibly interesting. And he's done a variety of other people. So his story really talks about some of the attributes that Jobs really did well. His attention to detail, like when you look at a brush surface of a Mac or a brush surface of a phone, it had to have a tactile feature. It had to be smooth, it had to be finished, and he valued that as opposed to a chunky kind of device. And so he really drove the driving to the customer service, the serving the customer, the connection to that. And that becomes a purpose that the engineers and the designers and the people around him bought into. Now, his behavior often would isolate and sort of negate people, but if you bought into where he was going, the other stuff you could possibly ignore and do it. And so that's an example of how a company can be purpose-driven in those areas.
The best thing I like about Steve Jobs is how he made things super simple. Like, his whole idea was to make things easy. That's what Apple does. They make devices that are user-friendly, that are easy to use. And when he created iPhone, what he actually did is he realized we had phones that had so many buttons on it, and every phone has applications, and every application has its own uses. So we can't just use one keyboard for every application. So he thought, you know what, let's just get rid of the keyboard. Let's just have one screen and see where that goes. How simple he made the iPhone. And that's what Albert Einstein said too. Like, if you can, simple things down, like, you actually understand them. That was his quote, that if you can't teach it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it enough. So I think that's like a part of being a genius, that you can simple things down.
Well, certainly more that you get people, and this is true in a classroom, it's true in a factory, it's true in a marketplace, the more you can make people understand. Look at IKEA. People generally don't like the idea of assembling stuff, like toys at Christmas time and things like that. And yet people will buy, in droves, will buy IKEA. High quality materials, fits together, it's reliable, it's trendy to a point, and it fits a certain demographic. Mm-hmm. Well, it comes with a little Allen wrench that you adjust your things with. So it's really quite simple, and you don't need multiple tools to do it. But it requires some assembly. And so those are interesting ways that somebody has driven a business model that makes it quite compelling for the average person. It comes stored flat, Now, there's lots of people who would say, I don't want to do that because I don't want to assemble anything. And then there's other people that said, look, I can assemble it, but I can modify it with this part or that part. I can switch them back and forth. And I think that true customization really drives some of that. You know, the original Henry Ford was the idea of, he said a couple things that were kind of interesting. First off, he says you can have any, when he talked about the Model T, the very first production car, he talks about the Model T as you can have any color you want as long as it's black. But Henry Ford was also, when you think about it, and Steve Jobs was this way as well, he provided a tool like a Mac where somebody famously at IBM, the CEO of IBM, said back in the 70s that I don't see a need for more than 5 computers in the world. That was the CEO of IBM. And Steve Jobs recognized that if you just simply respond to the customer, only the customer, and not be ahead of the customer, you'll miss the boat. And so Henry Ford said, look, if I delivered what the person asked, they would have wanted a faster horse. I drove a gas-powered automobile. They didn't know they need that. They didn't know they wanted that. And look, nowadays, our culture is so pervasive with the automobile and so forth. It's just an example. And I think another example I use, like certainly the Mac and some of the things that Wozniak and Jobs did together. I mean, they were a famous pair. They put together that stuff that sort of revolutionized some of those things. And IDEO, a famous design company, designed the first mouse and made it compelling. And then Gates was always around, not Gates, I'm sorry, mix up the guys, but Jobs was always around, let's make it an easy interface. You know, what you see was what you get. But the real brilliance, I think, aside from this, and I don't see the iPhone as one of those, although the iPhone certainly took out BlackBerry, but was the iPod.
Yeah.
So here you got the music device. So let's just think about it for a second. The technology existed already to put those devices together. There wasn't anything revolutionary. Although, when you got your iPod, you got a brushed finish to it, a very polished nickel kind of finish to it. You've got it in interesting kind of colors. You had it. But what he really did that revolutionized that is he went to the music industry and he said to them, look, let's pay for the music, but let's lower the cost so it becomes affordable to people, $1 a download kind of thing. Because you have to understand, at that point in time, people were ripping off through software like Napster.
Yeah.
They were ripping off music. They were stealing the music in an organized way. Jobs came in and said, let's take that. And so they created something called iTunes.
Yeah.
And so the real development of that particular product was the actual software that went with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think he made a fundamental mistake in that he did what Sony did with the Beta that led to the VCR becoming the dominant platform versus Beta. He didn't license iTunes, and then others drove the process to do it. And by licensing it, he could have kept it as the dominant platform in the same way that Microsoft has made the dominant platform. Whether Apple likes it or not, they have to put Microsoft on their computers and on their products on their phones because it's become pervasive. And I think he could have done that. So part of his vision was revolutionary and part of it was limiting. And so that's the challenge with all those people. But the other thing I think that Steve Jobs did, I think he didn't have any problem hiring people that were smarter than him.
Mm-hmm.
And Don Walker, that was the CEO of the auto parts, big auto parts company in Canada, basically said, he was here to a guest lecture, if you will, for the Hill Business Dinner some years ago. And he basically said, when you rank people out of 1 to 10, he said, 5s and 6s hire 4s. And 7 and 8s hire 9s and 10s. And what he was basically saying, if you're a sort of an insecure kind of CEO kind of person in a sort of a 6 or 7 kind of range, you're going to hire people that aren't as smart as you. And what Walker was saying, basically, and Magna Auto Parts was the company, and he was basically saying, if you're a strong leader, make sure the people around you are smarter than you. And it takes a lot for a person to do that, to admit, I don't know everything. And I don't have any problem admitting that. It's hidden back to the teaching. I don't have a problem admitting that somebody else might know something more about a product. And what we try to do and then in the classroom is bring that knowledge in through guest speakers and other people that have that broader knowledge. And I think that helps. But yeah, so 5s and 6s hire, 4s and 3s, and 8s and 9s, or 7s and 8s hire 9s and 10s. I mean, not doing quote exact liberal, but that's the premise is hire people around you that are smarter than you and also different than you. One of the things that we don't value as much as we should is the diverse thinking that goes with things. And maybe this is a little bit off topic, but Credit Suisse did a study of top performing companies in Europe. And it found that companies that had diverse leadership teams, women, racial minorities, whatever was made diversity work for them, they tended to perform their men and their white counterparts, if you will, the non-diverse, by 20%. A similar study in the U.S. has found that CEOs, women-led companies, will outperform their counterparts by 20%. And yet only 19% or so of Fortune 500 companies are led by female CEOs. And so what's the difference? Well, I think the difference comes down to some of that leadership and the emotional qualities. Women, I think, are more collaborative and more consultative with their approaches to things. They're more likely to listen to other people. They're more likely to value other people. And I think that makes a really powerful leader. That's where you're hiring people that are smarter than you to do those kind of things. And a person that thinks that they don't have those kind of skill sets. So as you know, in the U.S., and I don't mean to get into ruin your podcast by talking politics, but
No, not at all.
in the U.S., we have Biden and Trump, two some probably unqualified people to do the jobs. Biden is looked at as being that the supportive kind of thing, and as remarkable as it is, he is perhaps the least president that has shown the least amount of interest in hearing somebody else's opinion. And one of the challenges, I think, he's been in the job so long that he thinks he knows everything. And those kind of leaders are not the ones you want. Now, Trump, there's no way in the world I could ever defend Trump or his behavior or anything like that. So I'm not suggesting Biden's worse than Trump. I'm just telling you that both the U.S. Electorate has a really bad choice.
Yeah. You have to choose the lesser evil.
They have two, and I've got a friend in the U.S. that he calls America has two great crime families, Democrats and the Republicans. So the U.S. has created that dilemma where their politics are dominated by a bunch of old people. And unfortunately, it's the downfall of their electoral system. But it also reflects back to the comment that if I'm going to be a leader, I should be doing things that attract people. And certainly Biden will do things that will attract more people because he's not as confrontational and not as things like that. But if you don't listen to people, ultimately, you don't take their advice, then that's a challenge. And so his decision to pull out of Afghanistan, for example, was short-sighted and caused us all sorts of problems. And And that's just one example of where he's not listened to other people that told him what they should do and what he shouldn't do.
So when you talk about leadership, I have one question for you. What is your idea of an ideal leader? And how do you incorporate that into your personal life? Since you say like you've been in entrepreneurship for such a long time, you still run like your own consulting firm. So how would you take that?
A leader, and I'll stop being sort of cute with the definition. If you don't have any followers, you're not a leader. But I think people make the assumption that leaders have to be at some kind of level. And you can have a group of friends, and there's a leader in that group of friends, perhaps. There may be more than one leader. And so what does that person do? They tend to live and show examples of what they value and stay true to those values. They tend to have strong emotional intelligence. So they are sensitive to other people. They're sensitive to the way other people feel and what they say might have an impact on other people. They are supportive of other people's development and growth. And I'm still referring to our friends now. It's still using that as a model. Now, when you bring that element into organization, now we start to see leaders populate in those areas because people want to gather with them. Because the other thing the leader tends to do is to see a longer picture than, say, a manager does. And so when I explain to students the difference between a leader and a manager is somebody that's been given the job, the title, the responsibility by a job description and an organizational chart. A leader goes past the organizational chart. You can find a leader at any level, and they will be the ones that understands the direction and also has the ability to pull people around them towards that shared purpose that we started talking about initially. And so a leader exhibits those kind of behaviors. And again, a sports team can have a leader. A classroom can have a leader. A group of friends can have a leader, just like a corporation can have a leader. And in some cases, the CEO of an organization is not a leader. And that's unfortunate because there is a responsibility that goes with that if they had stronger emotional intelligence or they had stronger empathy or valued things like diversity and stuff like that, you might get different behaviors. But a leader is found anywhere.
Do you think parenting is a leadership job?
I think parenting is absolutely a leadership job. Now, you got me thinking about this for a second. And so one of the things that we do as parents is we try to, and I have grandkids now too. And so there's a tendency to try to shelter those people. Don't make the same mistakes I did. And there's logic for doing that. And we shouldn't have to everybody shouldn't have to develop a square wheel to find out the circular wheel works. We shouldn't have to repeat mistakes. But we also need to step aside and let people learn from themselves. And so the hardest thing for a parent to do is to say, look, I value you. You have to develop your own instincts, and I'll be supportive of you, but I do understand you'll make some of your own mistakes. And what we try to do as parents is try to make sure whatever that mistake is made, it's not so critical that it can never come back from. And so that's part of it. Absolutely. Parents have a job. And parents are one of those jobs that nobody ever gets trained for. You know, two people hang out together and they have a kid. There's no more qualifications than that, right? And so there's lots of really poor parents, and we see the consequence of those parents. But we also see parents that have been hit by adversity and challenges. You know, I think of the Indigenous population in Canada, where the 60s scoop, the residential schools took out generations of parents that were not trained on values that the community shared. They weren't trained on the culture. They weren't They didn't have role models as other parents. And this is one of the challenges when you get to an entrepreneurship. One of the challenges for many communities, when you see good quality parents around, that other parents will model those people and will do that. But if you don't have a peer set that is modeling, who do you model after? And this is one of the challenges for women entrepreneurs and new immigrants and Indigenous entrepreneurs, is there's fewer examples of those businesses. There's fewer examples of people that could be a mentor. There's fewer examples of somebody that I could aspire to that. And so nothing makes me happier to see this next generation and the current generations of people that are in fact providing leadership in those. So when I see the success of a Indigenous entrepreneur, I go, wow, just think of all the people that person is going to have an impact on.
Great.
Because when we look around, we've had an impact from other entrepreneurs as well, and other leaders as well, and other parents. And so if a parent is astute and reasoned and well thought, they will try to model the behaviors. And the interesting part is when our kids are growing up, our kids said to us, you are we had curfews for the kids and things like that because we thought it was important.
Yeah.
And the kids would say to us, we're the only parents that have their friends that have curfews. And we'd go, so? But the funny part, now that I'm a grandparent, is I see the kids are young, so they don't have curfews. They live with that. They don't know what a curfew is, but that example doesn't apply. But you start to see the behavior that we were modeling being exhibited by my daughter and my son. And it's the good things they're modeling. And obviously they're doing things, we feel that they're remarkable parents. And I'm going, wow, I think they're so much better than us. And so they took out the leadership from us, but they also looked at other examples, other people that they valued and said, hey, I could do this, or I didn't like the way this was done when I was growing up. I'm going to do it differently with my kids. And so I think that's part of the learning. So parents are part of that.
It's ever evolving, right?
Ever evolving. And I believe that I believed initially that kids were brought to teach me patience. I do know now that my wife was brought to teach me patience, and I also believe that my grandkids are brought to teach me patience. And at some point in time, I'm going to get it. So to your point, some point in time, I'll actually learn about being patient.
So how's the life with the grandkids right now?
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody tells you it's fun to have grandkids, but the grandkids are the thing that we enjoy the most about the grandkids. Of course, is their own personalities, their own development, their own discoveries. But one of the things that we enjoy so much is the interaction with their parents, and we see, wow, I guess we didn't screw this up so badly if our kids are raising good quality kids, because as a parent, you want your kids, when you're not around, to exhibit the values and behaviors that you think are important. So it's one thing to listen to everything dad and mom say, and I go out when they're not around and I do everything opposite to what they say. But one of the things we value, and this is an example of that, is that the grandkids come to you, and when they're with you without their parents, they're still exhibiting those behaviors and so the greatest compliment parents will get is, wow, your kid was over to visit or something, and your kid's a superb person. And you're going, wow, without me there sort of telling them what they can and can't do, they did it themselves. And I think that's the value I see of the grandkids, rather.
I feel like it's a good point of reflection, right? When you can look back of all the years, and now you look forward to the rest of the years.
Well, and the other thing too, I was an okay parent. I think I did some good things, and I think my kids might say I was a good parent, but I think I was an okay parent. There's no question that all of us, parents included, tend to get preoccupied with the small stuff. And so your room wasn't cleaned up today. So did that end world peace? Probably not. And so I think when you get to the grandparents and grandkids stage, you realize those small things really don't matter. And so managers and others that sweat the small stuff, they're probably doing themselves a disservice, right?
True.
An employee that does really good things should be rewarded and recognized for the good things and coached through the things that sort of bother and irritate the leader. And so that's probably a better way to do it, as opposed to let's focus on only the things that are negative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a lesson for me for sure. Right. Is focus on the negative, and I really try in all of my classes and my interactions now. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to become a better person and stuff like that. It's not a finished book by any stretch. And so these are the things you take away, and can I do a better job of that? So when you think about your word reflecting, those are the kinds of things you reflect about.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Right. So when you were growing up, you've done so many things. You've done businesses, you're teaching. Who was your leader? Who was that one person you looked up to? Was it your dad? Was it some businessman, some CEO?
I would say that it was probably my father who did that. And my father was sort of quiet in his leadership. Like, he didn't tell me this is the career path you should take. In fact, when I went to him sort of as a high school kid and I sort of said, hey, what should I do as career? What should I take on? He said, what do you think? Mm-hmm. And I go, Dad, that was probably the most unhelpful advice I possibly could get at the time.
Yeah, at the time.
But post to that, then he said, look, here's what I think you should do, and do this. Mm-hmm. And because when you attach your stuff onto somebody else, like we said to our son, oh, you'd be a great teacher. His mother was a teacher. And you'd be a great teacher. Yeah, I don't want to do that. Oh, you'd be a great police officer or something like that. Yeah, I don't want to do that. And so whatever we said to him around those things, it just wasn't going to happen. And so he found his own career path and has excelled at it. And I'm happy. And he's in the construction world now, building homes and stuff like that. And he's happy doing that kind of stuff. So what I imposed on a standard wouldn't have made him happy. And so to the point, I guess, when I looked at my father, his advice of not telling me what to do was unhelpful at the time, maybe, but it also really opened it up. And so when you think about, if your focus is, I'm told to focus on this, and it's a small circle, whereas if I could focus elsewhere, the world is my opportunity. And why would I restrict myself? And so I always tell students, keep open your options as long as you possibly can. A student that comes in my first year class and says, I want to be an accountant. And I said, well, okay, look at the things that's required to be an accountant. We need accountants. Accountants is a great profession. But figure out if that's what you want to do. Take on an accounting job in a co-op term or something. Find out if you want to do. But don't narrow your choices so that at the end of the exercise, you'll only have taken this narrow stream. All I did was finance classes in my education, for example, and I never. So for me, some of the more interesting classes that I actually remember back to are completely outside of what my requirements were. You know, a psychology class. Some of the other classes that I looked at and I go, wow, I'm still using content from that classes. The textbook stuff I can look up if I need to, if I've forgotten it. But the other stuff, I've modeled it. And so I think it's really valuable for people to be open to all sorts of alternatives and keep those options open as long as time. And that's really what my dad was telling me at some point in time. We had 3 of the 4 boys went into business related things eventually, and one went into physiotherapy because his mother was a physio and so forth. And so but nobody ever said to any of the kids, you should be one of these things. And if they had, the person probably wouldn't have been that. They wouldn't have been happy because that was your dream, not my dream. And I've said those things. I've said, my daughter came to me and said, look, I worked for a few years. I want to go to school. And I said, what did you like about the jobs that you had? Because she told me she wanted to be in interior design. So I set up, like a dad, I got involved. I set up a internship for her, the first non-paid internship that Stantec had ever done before. And she came back and said, I didn't really enjoy that. Okay. You've been working for a while, store manager and things like that. So what things do you like? So I don't want to be in retail anymore. Okay, what did you like about the stuff you did? Well, I liked working with people, the HR, I liked the marketing side of that. And I said, look, this sounds like you want to be in business. So where do you want to go do business? And the funny part of the story is that she says, well, I'm going to go to the University of Regina, but if I see you in the hallways, I won't talk to you. And that lasted for a couple of weeks. But I did respect her wish to some extent, and that really was, don't make other people treat me differently. And if you've had older brothers or older sisters and you go through a elementary school, high school, and the teacher always says, oh, I liked your brother or sister better than you, that's the worst thing to have happen. And so I didn't tell faculty colleagues that she was my daughter, and the Anderson name was common enough that people didn't have to ask. And so I respected that choice for her, but she made it on her own. She made that call and the decision. And if I had told her to do that right from the get-go, she would have resisted. Or if it didn't work in the first class she didn't do well in or something or was unhappy with, she would turn to me and said, look at that. You told me to do the thing that I didn't want to do. And so my dad's advice way back, finishing that circle, do what you want, what will make you happy, was the best advice.
Remember, her name's Danny, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I remember back in 2019, she did a guest lecture for Biz 100. And she used to work at Ford, right? As a marketer.
She worked at Capital.
Yeah,
Auto
exactly.
Group,
Yeah, I remember that.
With their digital media stuff.
Yeah, I remember she was doing a full-on presentation.
Yeah.
And she was phenomenal then. Yeah, that's insane. I still remember that.
And she is phenomenal. This is a thing that I enjoy, that she's a phenomenal worker. She's a phenomenal, the son as well are phenomenal peoples too, which is even more important to me. But it's funny. I pushed her to get onto social media, which is not usually what a parent does, but I pushed her to get onto social media and said, you're going to need this skill. And now, what I know about social media, and I think I'm reasonably intelligent about social media, it's only a fraction what she understands and does and knows. And so I have since brought her in to consulting projects I've done to work on social media opportunities for the client, because she knows it and I don't. And so there's an example of how, somebody else's knowledge, somebody else's experience is just going to be different and better.
So this is like a really important question that I wanted to ask you for like a very long time. And especially like after this conversation we're having too. If you could give one piece of advice to a 20-year-old or somebody who's going to start university, who's got their whole life ahead of them, what would you tell that one piece of advice?
Yeah, one single piece of advice. Yeah. You've met me before, right? Like, can you imagine me giving one piece of single advice? So let me make it multi-part.
Sure, let's do it.
I think one of the things I would say is to recognize that the path you're on may not be the path that you end up on, and you should not worry about it. And so when I look at my career, I talked to you, I was in executive roles, CEO of organizations, and then I got in as an entrepreneur, and now I'm in academia, for lack of a better word. That doesn't look like a standard career progression, but when I look back at it, it sort of fits together. I had that broader experience. I had those learnings that I had as a manager. Then I wanted to practice those things as an entrepreneur and do it differently and be innovative that way. And then the learnings from both those things were things that I thought I could relate to other people through academia, and it sort of makes sense. But if we marked my career out from as a 20-year-old, nobody would pick that as a career. And so I think, worrying about deciding what your life is going to be as a 20-year-old, what it's going to look like at age 60, is not what you want to do as a 20-year-old. The other thing I would say to those people, again, I'm taking the prerogative, not just one piece of advice, but I think is make those experiences that you have along the way as rich as possible. And try things, and try other things, and don't be afraid of failure. And don't be afraid to, travel and do some of the things that would lend you other experiences. And I think if I was talking to myself as a 20-year-old, because I was pretty serious when I got in, I got from university and so forth, and then I immediately got into work, and I thought that was important for me and all those kind of things. And if I could tell myself, my 20-year-old self, and I said, you know what? Don't take that job. Go travel. Do something else different. Get those kind of experiences. Find out where you want to settle down or do those kind of things. And don't have to make everything around a choice about, is this going to get me to career level 2 next? And because those things will come with time, right? So again, I guess I'd put those two things together and sort of say, be flexible and be willing to try some things out that are different than outside of your comfort zone, and don't try to program your life at age 20.
That's a really good point. I'm going to ask you something that I usually ask everybody out there. What's your why? Why do you get out of the bed in the morning?
I like to build things. And you go, oh, well, you should be in construction. and there's some of that. I mean, there's, my daughter says, well, your longtime dream was to be an architect. You should have done that. And that's okay. That's fine. But when I say build things, people can be of different kinds. I can be administrator. I can manage things. I can do that. And I can create some opportunities. And what I like to do, I like to grow things. And so what I see myself in is when I work with clients, I'm helping them grow their organizations or their skill sets or their business. When I'm working with students, I'm helping them grow their skill sets and capabilities to go forward. When I work in my volunteer things, it's all about growing things. So this is not being critical of an associate dean, for example, but I've been asked to be an associate dean before, and I said, that administration thing is not me. I don't want to administer things. I want to be involved in projects that are development and growth orientated, whether it's people or organizations or society. I love to do things. I'm working hard to try to build things in sort of a intercultural things. I'm trying to create opportunities, and the role I have to help people that don't have maybe access, indigenous entrepreneurs, new immigrants, things like that, that shows that there might be opportunities for them to do the things that they want to do as well. And so I think my ultimate goal is I want to make, and it sounds really noble, but in my own small way, I want to make our community and our world a little bit better. And the way I do that is to enable other people to grow themselves.
Isn't that part of being a good leader?
Yes, I think it is part of a good leader. And the leader, whether I'm a good leader or not, it's the followers that tell me that. But I think one of the traits of a good leader is maybe a selflessness. And so, do I have to get the recognition? Do I have to get the benefits of this? And it was funny when I started with the Vian Timmons, the president of the university. When I started the first day, she said to me, "Bruce, I need you to do 3 trips. I need you to go to Colombia, South America.
Oh, wow.
I need you to go to Ottawa, and I need you to go to Assiniboia, Saskatchewan, an hour and a half from Regina." And guess which trip I took? I got the Assiniboia trip. So Ottawa, I said, one of my staff would be better doing that than for me just to go to Ottawa, where I have a brother that lives and all that kind of stuff. If I was selfish, I would have simply said, I'm the best person to go. But that wouldn't have helped with growth. And the Columbia piece, I said, it's going to take too much time when I'm first starting. I'm going to be away. And what's the impact of having, turnover in a leader and then being away for a week to go do the Columbia thing, which was teaching about fundraising to business colleges and stuff down there. And so Assiniboia I went out to meet with a fantastic guy, a donor of ours, who runs an art gallery out there, and had been a corporate guy forever and had come back to small town Saskatchewan where he'd grown up, was investing in the small town community, and that was the best choice for me. And when you talk about the leader, I think the leader has to be selflessness, and that guy has to recognize this is a great opportunity for you. You should do it. And, that person would support somebody else's development. Often a leader is informally a mentor. Like I formally mentor entrepreneurs. So through 3 different programs, I do entrepreneurs. I get a rotation. I work with an entrepreneur for 2 years, and then they move on to something else because I've helped them to a point, and then somebody else can help them. And I do lots of informal mentoring where somebody comes up to me and says, what would you do here and how would you do it? And mentoring is a lot like leadership. It's asking the right questions. And it's requiring the individual take responsibility for what they're going to do. So many people say to me, I won't delegate things because that person I delegate to will take more time to do all of this than I take. And I said, so your solution is to do everything? No, your solution should be to accept that it's going to take time for this person to learn, but at some time they're going to be better at it than you are. And that's true delegation, where you've broadened your team and now you leverage it. Because some people simply think if I just put more hours into the day, I'll get everything done. And that's not leveraging other people's talents and so forth. So, a right question to ask in a mentoring kind of thing could be examples like, What things did you consider? What about this choice that you're making makes sense to you? Is there another way for you to do it? These are simple questions that somebody in the midst of all the things that they're doing, the old expression, I'm in the forest and I can't see beyond because of the trees. Or somebody else who used the analogy of a 30,000 foot or 10,000 foot view. And those are deceiving little stories. They're perhaps not as practical as they may seem, but somebody that's immersed in the day-to-day kind of thing of something of their life or whatever else often can't really get somebody to tell them not what to do, but to get them to think about what they could do themselves. And so a leader is less likely to say to you, do it this way. Because that's the difference between a leader and manager, really is. The leader is concerned about effectiveness. Are we doing the right thing? The manager is concerned about efficiency. Are we doing the right thing well? And I prefer to be in the area of working on the effectiveness. Should we do this in the first place? Is there a better way to do it? And those are the kinds of big questions that get asked. Leaders and mentors and others will ask of people to try to pull them back from the emergent situation they're in and think about what it could be and what it should be. And the only person that can tell them what it should be is themselves.
Now I'll look back to this. I think the best managers I've had, the best leaders I've had working in corporate world are the ones who they have a project in hand, and I'm a new intern or I'm new at the role. They could just tell me, this is the project, this is the way we do it, just get it done by a week or 2 weeks. But the best managers I've had, they explain what the project is. Nikhil, this is what the project demands us to do. Can you find a way to do it? Can you find a better way to do it? This is how we do it. Can you find a better way to do it?
Yeah. When I started a new organization as a manager, leader, whatever that is, I sit down with the staff individually, and I go to their workspaces. I don't call them to my office because the desk in my office is a barrier between them and me.
Yeah.
And at the very least, I'll put out a circular table or something like that where we are not behind a desk of imposing of. So I'll go to their office and I'll ask them typically 3 questions. Tell me, why are you here? What makes you stay here? And what can I do to help you? Ask 3 questions. And I think that's what a leader does. So the leader, really in that particular example that you gave around that, would be saying, here's the project, here's the parameters of the project, here's what we want to do the project, and here's how the project fits into the big picture of what we want to do. So when you develop this may be part of what a customer sees as an interface, and we want to be friendly. So it sets the parameters of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't say you must do it this way, you must do it that way, but sets the expectations. Some of the people you'll read about, managers and so forth, they talk about, they think they're empowering when they say to the person, don't come to me with problems. Come to me with solutions. And what they're really saying is, when you have a problem in your workplace, come in to talk to me, and I think it's completely wrong. And by that I mean, so a person should be able to come in and talk to the manager about the problem and understand what the nature of the problem is. And now, the manager and leader doesn't want to inherit the problem. They don't want to say, now I'm responsible because you've told me, so I'll share that conversation with that person and say, okay, I see the problem. Now I want you to go back and work on some ideas. But I'm never going to say to the person, come back and don't come to me with a problem, come with me the solution. Well, they may not have a solution, and now you've eliminated that opportunity to do some development. And so I feel that's a mistake with somebody, is that we should recognize that the problem and the solution process is a iterative one, and that we're going to go back and forth but at no time will I give up, will I take on ownership of the product. No, we're going to talk about it, but then you're going to go away and work on that problem, because it's still your problem, and come back and we'll talk further as you develop that. So I think that's a leader, sort of does that coaching all the way through. I think the manager says, look, I don't want that problem, so only tell me the solution. And somehow that seems to be empowering to somebody. When I think you're in a tough spot, having somebody says, well, it's your thing to figure out, go ahead, is really hard. So I think don't take on the problem, but also don't defer leadership around coaching through the problem.
So yeah, so towards the end of the podcast, we just do like a rapid fire round. I'll just ask you a couple questions. Pranav would ask you a couple questions. Just have to answer in like one word or one sentence.
Okay.
If you can.
You've noticed how long-winded I can be. So, okay.
Do you want to start?
Sure. So, what are you most grateful for in your life? Sorry.
Family.
Okay, awesome. What's one thing that you value a lot right now, but you didn't used to a while ago?
Integrity is the most important thing. I'm not sure, I didn't value it before, but I think I realize how important it is.
If you could have a conversation with anybody in the world, dead or alive, any profession, any field, who would it be?
Nelson Mandela.
And why is that?
Because I think he exhibited behaviors, forgiveness, and behaviors that were not expected of somebody that had been treated so poorly and had given up so much of his life being imprisoned in Robben Island and so forth. Nelson Mandela, absolutely.
Your favorite restaurant in Regina?
Favorite restaurant is, this will piss off all the other restaurants that I like Sky.
Sky Park.
No,
Sky
Bistro, right?
in the
Sky Bistro.
Sky Bistro that is in the Science Center.
Oh, okay. That's where we met Ash, remember?
Yeah, that's true. That's right.
They're only open for lunches, so I have other favorites too. Yeah.
What do you like the most about them?
What I like about Sky is it was started by a young entrepreneur, a young Indian guy, and he brought in sort of Indian street food.
Well,
And he brought in a diverseness of menu that we weren't seeing at that point in time in the community. And he had a great work ethic. He was a great guy to talk to. And so that's what I valued with that restaurant. And there's others like that too, of course, increasingly.
Perfect.
one more.
Go for it. Yeah, one.
You go.
Your favorite quote that you would probably include in speeches, in your classes, in a conversation that means a lot to you, resonates with you. Or we can make sub quotes under that.
Well, I would say it probably would go to, say, a Robert Frost quote, and it goes roughly like this. That, and I'm paraphrasing it now, but I took the path less traveled, and it made all the difference.
I think that's an amazing place to end that, to be honest. I don't think we have anything else to add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, this was an amazing conversation, Bruce. I think
Good.
Nikhil and I, our viewers, have learned a lot. And there's a lot of knowledge that we can incorporate in our personal life, our future careers, our personal lives. And we just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity.
You're most welcome.
Awesome.
I think the fact that you're doing this is part of that learning, and that's great to do. And if others can benefit from that learning, so be it.
And we're really grateful you gave us that opportunity, because the knowledge that you have, I don't see a lot of people that, but like nowadays, like with that mindset, with that knowledge, with that mentality.
Especially the extensive knowledge
Exactly,
that you have
yeah,
about
yeah.
so many things, from entrepreneurship to teaching to life. It's just amazing.
Yep. Well, I don't think I know as much as you're giving me credit for, but I do acknowledge that I've had lots of experiences. So
100%.
And I guess that's part of it and that's certainly that 20-year-old self again. Go and have some experiences.
And that's what we'll do.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bruce.